Hey comrades, before this video starts, I want to apologize for some video and audio issues. I had to refilm the second half because I fucked up my recording, so if anything seems a little off, that's probably why. The other thing I wanted to bring up is RevTeam. RevTeam is a growing group of lefty creators who are working together to regularly create videos and coordinate release schedules so that we can all boost each other, push back against an algorithm that actively marginalizes us, and stand in solidarity. In fact, this last week's topic was solidarity. I joined RevTeam a little late in that cycle, and since I was already working on this video, compounded by a bit of personal tragedy, I didn't participate in that round, but I wanted to shout it out anyway. My RevTeam comrades include folks like Actual Context, Re-Education, Intellectual Darkwave, Silverface, Ron the Rugged Midwesterner, and many others, and more are joining us all the time. Instead of just listing them all, I'll be linking below to a playlist of all the Solidarity videos. Check it out, and make sure to subscribe to all involved, and stay tuned for more work from RevTeam. I'll be making a video for the next round, and I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say what the topic is, so it'll be a surprise, and you'll just have to come back and find out more, won't ya? And without further ado, let's get on to the video. So, I've been wanting to start doing some content about Senator Bernard Sanders and his current bid for the US presidency. I talked quite a bit about Bernie on my appearance on Zonzi's podcast Left Thinking. Zonzi is awesome, and don't worry, he's had on better guests than me. Like just recently, he had on Faraday Speaks, and I haven't listened to it yet, but I'm sure it's great because it's Faraday Speaks. Faraday's awesome. So go check out Zonzi. Zonzi's really great. Cannot recommend him enough. But I've been wanting to do my own content about Bernie and kind of trying to figure out how to fit it into the sorts of things I do here. And lucky me, I came across a video by Kristi Winters about how she will never vote for Sanders in the Democratic primary. She made this video back in September, so I'm assuming her views are pretty current, and it's a lot of criticisms of Bernie that I tend to see frequently, so it really was just the sort of thing I was looking for. Before I start, if you came here for some blood sports or to see me dunk on Kristi Winters, you're gonna be disappointed. She and I may disagree on this and some other things, but I actually respect her. She was one of the first creators I came across when I came back to YouTube in 2016, and she's taught me quite a lot. So, I don't really have any interest in dragging her personally, though I will get assertive. I don't think she's stupid for not supporting Bernie, but I do think her reasons for not doing so are bad. And they are common and not unique to her, so again, this is not really about her. I'm not interested in talking about people. I'm more interested in
talking about ideas.
I also don't know exactly who she's supporting, and I don't think it matters. I mean, it matters, but not for the purposes of this video. As always, I invite you to watch her video first because I won't be showing all of it. Okay? Let's do this.
I'm gonna get so much hate for this video. Hey guys, it's Kristi. It's good to be in a recorded video again. Usually I do live shows. It's been a while since I've done one of these, but there is something that I wanted to put out there that was suitable for a short video. It's a question that people do roll up into my mentions and ask me from time to time. So I am going to explain to you guys why I will never vote for Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary. Most of my interactions with Sanders supporters, when they ask me why I don't support their candidate, they're not really interested in hearing why I don't support their candidate. What they're waiting for is for me to give any reason at all that they will then turn around and tell me that I'm stupid or uninformed or I'm a neoliberal or I'm a Republican. So basically my interactions with 90% of Sanders supporters are really, really negative, disingenuous experiences of people who are looking to bully me or intimidate me or judge me or shame me into voting for their candidate rather than having a conversation. I'm expecting that from this video too. I am fully expecting a bunch of Sanders supporters to come into my comments and tell me why I'm stupid and wrong, why I'm really a Republican, why I'm a neoliberal shill, why I'm whatever insult they want to throw at me for not supporting their candidate. And that's fine. I'm going to ignore their comments. Most importantly, it will never change my mind. You guys go ahead, Bernie bros, knock yourselves out in the comments. You're just going to make my point for me. In advance, thank you.
God, this really reminds me of that one drill tweet. For the record, no matter who or what you advocate for, if your advocacy for that thing is just insulting people that disagree with you, then you're not advocating for shit. Obviously, part of this problem is that the social media platforms that are our primary method of engaging with each other on these topics incentivize short, emotional, and competitive content. So this is just something we kind of have to try to resist. But especially for my fellow leftists, yeah, some conservatives and fascists are a lost cause, but liberals like Kristi are gettable. They have to be. There aren't enough of us. I mean, maybe Kristi herself isn't gettable, but she has an audience, and the more you alienate her, the more you alienate him. We need to be thinking more broadly than just the one lib we're arguing with. However, this is not really a reason to not support Bernie, but I'm gonna get to that later. In this next bit, she talks about her background, and I'm including it because I think it's important to understand where she's coming from.
First thing I want to say a little bit about my background is I'm an American, so I get to vote in the Democratic primary, and I have been a Democrat for my entire life. I started out, my first time voting was for a Democrat. First president I voted for was Bill Clinton. I have voted for a Democrat in every election I've ever been able to have the opportunity to vote in. I have never voted for a Republican. The closest I've come to voting for a Republican is voting for people who are running for nonpartisan office who leaned Republican. I have been a Democratic supporter in the polling booth. I was actually hired by the Democratic Party of Wisconsin to do events and help them raise money, along with partnering with county Democratic Party events. So I worked for the party, and I've also worked for people elected to represent Democratic values. I worked for State Senator Fred Risser. I worked for Representative Tom Springer as his office manager in the minority, and then I worked for State Senator Kevin Shabilsky, who worked on the Appropriations Committee trying to advance Democratic policy platform ideas on the Finance Committee in the Senate for Wisconsin appropriations. I have spent my weekends doing get out the vote calls for special elections, general elections in the states. I have spent my vacation time knocking on doors. So I am a Democrat through and through. Don't try to tell me I'm not a Democrat, Sanders supporters.
So Kristi has done a lot of good political work. I mean, she's done more than me. I'm not going to pick apart the politicians that she's worked for because that's not the point of this video, and I don't really know all that much about Wisconsin politics. What I do know is that Wisconsin is a traditionally Democratic stronghold, so her party loyalty is not much of a surprise here. However, the reason why Wisconsin was always so reliably blue was organized labor. Once upon a time, unions abounded in Wisconsin, and the Dems and organized labor worked very closely. But during the period of neoliberalism, the Democrats let their relationships with organized labor fall apart, at least a bit, in favor of corporate financial support. And because you can't uphold both the interests of the wealthy and the working class, since their interests are diametrically opposed, this balancing act has kind of fallen apart for the Democrats. And Wisconsin has particularly shown the weakness of this strategy. Donald Trump winning the state in 2016 is just a piece of this. Standing back and letting the labor movement weaken really shot the Dems in the foot. Not only did it make them look unprincipled, but it made room for the Republicans to come into power and just destroy labor and voting rights in that state. If you don't know who Scott Walker is, look him up. He's human fucking garbage. So, while I'm sure her experience as a Wisconsinite has really galvanized her hatred of the Republican Party, her experience in that state should give her some understanding of why the working class might be a bit disillusioned with the Democrats.
First and foremost, I want a Democrat to be president, and that means having a history with the party and having a commitment to the party's values.
Yes, but what are those values? Because if they are what they should be, the strengthening of working class power, universal health care, eliminating poverty, expanding education and voting rights, and, in short, taking power from the few and giving it to the many, then, well, there's one candidate in particular who embodies these values better than the others. Guess who? And if those aren't the values of the Democratic Party, then they aren't the party of working folks. And if they're not loyal to us, why should we be loyal to them? Also, Bernie, I wrote the damn Bill Sanders, has a long history of working with the Democrats, just not as an actual member. I mean, it's not like he caucuses with the Republicans. Okay, so remember in 2016 when the Hillary camp put it out there that, you know, when they were both in the Senate, her and Bernie voted the same, like, 93% of the time or whatever? Guess what times Bernie voted against what the Democrats voted for? Well, there was the Iraq War, the Keystone Pipeline, sanctions on Iran, who were totally obeying the terms of the nuclear deal, the Patriot Act, the Defense of Marriage Act, you know, important shit.
I don't vote for a person. Like, yes, I vote for Barack Obama, but I don't keep following Barack Obama after he left office. He took up the mantle of the party and carried that forward. And he strengthened the party and carried that forward. And he lifted up other Democrats and he carried that forward.
Pray forgive me, all of you who miss having a president with a sense of basic dignity. I do too. But Obama did not strengthen the Democrats. In 2008, Dems scored all 3 houses and a supermajority, because the George W. Bush administration, between the War on Terror and the worst financial crisis in 80 years, had so thoroughly pissed off and damaged the country that the Republicans didn't have a snowball's chance in hell. And yes, Obama's charisma definitely helped. But the Democrats, and Obama in particular, absolutely squandered that opportunity. If he had actually wanted to strengthen the party, he would have tied bankers to horses and drugged them through the street. He would have bailed out homeowners instead of those bankers. And while Obamacare was a step in the right direction, it was a quarter measure at best. And do you know how I know that the Obama years disappointed Americans and weakened the party, other than, the 2016 election? Of course. Occupy Wall Street happened. If the Dems had done what they should have and taken power away from the motherfuckers who tanked the economy, then people wouldn't have needed to take to the street and try to take it into their own hands. And I got a pretty good idea of who those people will and won't vote for. You want to strengthen the party? Put the person with a grassroots movement behind them in charge of it. And bring in those people you alienated.
That's what I'm looking for in the leader of my party, is someone who is actually committed to and knows the people in my party and is willing to strengthen it, wants to see a Democratic majority in the House and the Senate and in the White House, not just for him or herself.
What about themselves, Kristi? Seriously though, I'm confused as to how you can frame somebody whose campaign slogan is "Not Me, Us," who started an organization called Our Revolution, who has repeatedly made it clear that he's not the person who's going to bring about change. It will be the people behind him who are going to do it, is doing all of this just for himself. This is an accusation that gets thrown at Sanders that demonstrates either dishonesty or ignorance on the part of the person making it. Now, I'm going to be charitable to Kristi. I'm not going to just assume that she's being dishonest and assume that she isn't that well versed in his long history of working class advocacy. Please, go look it up. The man is a fucking rock star. He cut his teeth as a student organizer during the civil rights movement. I think most people who saw this picture, just kind of assumed that he was like some lefty college student who like showed up to a protest to throw a rock at a cop or something. But he was actually an organizer. Even back then, he was doing important political work. Kind of like how Kristi does. If Bernie was in it for himself, he would have just retired off the money from his book instead of, running for president just so that he could make himself pay higher taxes. And yeah, he's not loyal to the Democrats. He's loyal to the working class. If you're loyal to party above people, you need to change your priorities.
So on that basis, how do I eliminate possible candidates from my selection choice? Well, a damn easy one is looking around to see who isn't a Democrat. And you guys might not think that that's important. Your ideology might be all about the revolution, whether it's an anarchist revolution or a communist revolution or a socialist revolution or a green revolution. I know that's important to you. What is important to me as a voter in the Democratic primary is electing someone who actually is a Democrat. And Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat. He's never been a Democrat. He is not a loyal party member. He is not helping the party. He has not put himself out there to grow the party.
Fair, but you have to understand why that criterion is unimportant to myself and others. For starters, my desire for a revolution is not as connected to my advocacy for Bernie Sanders as you may think. Yes, Bernie aligns closest with my politics, but I don't think he's going to bring about the glorious workers' utopia. At best, in terms of that, his presidency would serve to shift politics left and make room for me and my comrades to exist in a more mainstream fashion, and his plans to strengthen the labor movement are very important for leftist causes going forward. But my real reason for supporting Sanders is the relief of human suffering. From his healthcare policy to his housing policy to his foreign policy, his is the platform that will do the most to relieve human suffering. Other candidates want Medicare for all, but his plan is bolder, and he's the reason we're talking about it. Other candidates want to expand social services, but they want to enact regressive taxation in order to pay for it. Other candidates want to curtail foreign intervention, but fall flat on their face when it comes time to call a coup, or an assassination an assassination. And of course, I'm not so delusional as to think that Bernie is just going to walk into office and, get everything he wants. But since he does have a movement behind him, and his policies are popular among Americans, not just Democrats and us youngins, he actually is able to fight for them from a position of strength. And a strong bargaining position is something the Democrats haven't had in decades. The last time was Johnson. He was an asshole, but he was our asshole. So, Dr. Winters, while you may find loyalty to a political organization to be of paramount importance, I take a slightly more utilitarian view when it comes to who I want setting the political agenda for the next 4 years and possibly the next several decades.
Bernie Sanders, if you guys didn't know this, in his home state, the way he gets elected as an independent is that in the first instance, he runs as a Democrat in the Democratic primary. And then he beats whatever Democratic candidate he is going up against. When he wins the Democratic primary, he then renounces the party and runs as an independent. Now, if he just ran as an independent the whole time, that would be something, but I find it particularly galling that he would appropriate our primary structure in order to eliminate anyone who might be a competitor on his left, and then renounces the party, leaving us essentially without, anyone who can stand as a Democrat in the general.
You'll forgive me if I struggle to hold in laughter at the idea that Bernie does this to prevent getting primaried from the left. Now, I can see why you'd find this galling. I do. It seems like a shady tactic. But there is one thing to take note of here. The people of Vermont voted for him 3 times. If they had a problem with this, they had ample opportunity to stop him. I'm sure that his primary opponents brought it up many times, but he just kept winning those primaries. When he first ran for Senate, he was even endorsed by Harry Reid, Barack Obama, Chuck Schumer, and Howard Dean, who very rightly pointed out that Bernie votes with the Democrats 98% of the time. So, he wasn't trying to avoid competition on his left. He was trying to avoid it on his right. So say he just run as an independent, right? So, in the general election, you would have a Republican, Bernie, and a Democrat. A Democrat who would almost certainly run a more conservative campaign to distinguish themselves from Bernie, and also probably because they'd be funded by the sorts of people who wouldn't want Bernie to be in office. So, not on his left. Now, it's no guarantee, but in all likelihood, the reliably Democratic votes would be split between the Democrat and Bernie, and then the Republican would win. At which point, Bernie would be called a spoiler and told to not run at all. To be fair, he could have not renounced the Democratic Party, but his independence is important. Yes, for his image, the way his constituents view him is an important part of him being able to do the work he does. Him not being beholden to any political organization allows him to serve his constituents unrestrained and call the Democrats out when they're fucking up, which is a lot. This is something the people of Vermont seem to like 2/3 majority like. So to bring this back to the idea of democratic values, I think that a candidate winning an election and then winning in another election and then behaving in the manner in which he was elected to behave, and then repeating this process 3 times, is about as close to democratic as liberal democracy is capable of getting. Now, I'm going to skip ahead a bit because she just spends like the next minute or so just reinforcing her point. So we're just going to jump ahead. Like I said, you should watch her video.
It drives me crazy that Bernie Sanders claims he's a socialist, but essentially all his policies are just making capitalism a little nicer and a little more mild. And that's not socialism. The alternative to capitalism isn't nicer capitalism, if you understand my meaning. Like, what do you critique capitalism with if your version of socialism is just about a universal basic income or redistributing the way that we tax capitalism? Oh, I can't even tell you how frustrating I find it when he is out there basically appropriating the term socialism, which already is tainted in America, and he's selling it as essentially just a nicer, it's capitalism with a human face. It's capitalism with, a higher minimum wage and a different tax structure for the wealthy. That's not socialism.
You know who doesn't have a problem with him appropriating the term socialist? Socialists. Of course, some do, but they're not approaching this from the same direction that Kristi is. When they take issue with it, they are afraid that he is going to distract from actual socialist projects, whereas Kristi is just concerned he's not being technically correct, which, in fairness, is the best kind of correct. She has no interest in socialism, so when she invokes the idea that the term socialism is already tainted in America, what she means is that nobody in my country understands what the term socialism means, and she's implying that Bernie is contributing to that. But you are looking at evidence to the contrary. Exhibit A. Before a wild-haired Jewish man started running for president in 2016, I too thought that socialism was when the government does stuff, and the more stuff it does, the more socialister it is. And I knew that Europeans had it better than us in terms of social programs, and, I wanted me a piece of that. So, when Bernie ran, I was like, wow, shit, this is actually a possibility. And so, I looked into it more. And now I know that socialism is the workers' control of means of production, put simply, and that anarchism, again put simply, is the dismantling of unjust hierarchies, and my god, don't get me started on Posadism. And yes, I know I'm anecdotal, but I'm far from alone. Bernie increased interest in socialism among the young, and some of those people are going to go on to leftist Twitter, and most of them are going to get frustrated and leave, but some of them are going to stay, and they'll be told to Google Bookchin. And some of them might Google Bookchin. The point is that as he admittedly misuses the term socialism and drives interest in the subject, that more people will learn about it, and that actually stands to help left-wing causes and for people to understand what socialism is, ironically enough, because that's how marginal socialism has become. Any mainstreaming of it helps.
And so even if I supported, like, public ownership of all things, which I don't, I'm not about the revolution, I'm not about having anarchy. Sorry, guys. I would like to see progressive change in America, and I would like us to essentially move to a position where we could be kind of a version like, the American version of the Social Democrats. And I think getting really progressive Democrats elected across the country, not like, we're socialists and we're going to, eliminate private health insurance. That won't get elected. But slowly, if we expand Obamacare and we put in more competition, we harness, instead of, we put more constraints on healthcare in terms of their profitability and who they have to cover and how they pay for their drugs, all that kind of stuff, we can get to a place where we have the benefits of a lot of European countries.
Okay, so, Kristi, you have to pick one. Either Bernie Sanders is just a social democrat who wants to make capitalism nicer, or he's some radical anarchist socialist, because you keep bouncing back and forth between these two characterizations of him. Personally, I think he's a little more left than where he's campaigning from for practical reasons, but like you said, he's basically running on social democracy. The thing you said you wanted. But I see you are a gradualist, and I'm very happy to know that you are in a place that you can support people who may possibly someday eventually maybe hope to make some sorts of changes. We aren't all that lucky. Okay. This is going to get a little gross, and I'm probably going to regret revealing this. So at the time I wrote this, I ran out of deodorant 3 days ago. Not now. I smell real good right now. I'm trying to stick to a low-carb diet because I find that that's really good for me. But it's really hard because at the end of every month, I have to either buy a big bag of rice or bake bread just so that I have something to eat for that week. The apartment I live in, which, bear in mind, was the cheapest that I could find, yet I still pay about half my income in rent. At least once a month, I have to go around to all the walls that the outside is on the other side of with bleach spray and spray all the spots of black mold that pop up. It is incredibly dangerous, and I am probably slowly dying in this place. I haven't been to the doctor in about 10 years, and I actually don't know how long it's been since I went to the dentist. I only know that it's before either set of my wisdom teeth grew in. Yes, you can grow more than one set of wisdom teeth. It is a thing, and it hurts like a motherfucker. I am not the poorest person in this country, and certainly not the world, but I live very precariously. Kristi, I don't know you, but I am sure that you have not lived my kind of precarious existence, or if you have, you certainly haven't done it for as long as I have, because it's been my entire adult life. And that is why you don't see eye to eye with Sanders supporters. If we get rude or aggressive, I mean, look, every group has its assholes, but it's probably because we are sick of living on the edge while the Republicans suck us dry and the Democrats promise to do something about it in due time eventually, while the rest of the global north looks on in horror at how we live, as they should. I, and others like me, do not have the luxury of time, and frankly, neither do you. The world is on fire, and the fascists are back, and I know you've noticed. If we don't tackle climate change and income inequality right now in a radical way, we won't get a chance to tackle it at all. Progressive change is nice and all, but we simply don't have the time for the tiny technocratic fixes that have not and will not produce the necessary change. Take healthcare, for example, which you brought up. Each step you take to strengthening Obamacare is going to be a separate political fight. And every time the Republicans come back into office, they're gonna work it back. just like they tried to do in 2017. They were literally one vote away from repealing it entirely. And Kristi, competition in healthcare is not the answer. Healthcare is arguably the greatest example of an industry that needs to be removed from the profit motive, and you have to know this. It's arguably the greatest achievement of social democracy. This is a conservative talking point, Kristi. It's statements like this that are the reason people call you a neoliberal, and to be clear, I think those people are being disingenuous and they're misrepresenting your politics. But the point is that strengthening markets and increasing competition are talking points of the now defunct neoliberal era. We need things, and especially healthcare, to be decommodified, not more commodified, and we need it yesterday. Like I said, progressive change is nice and all, but it is long past time that those of us who need and want that change start dragging those that don't into the 21st century, kicking and screaming if we have to. Sorry, that was a bit of a rant.
All right, guys, so now, of course, the inevitable question. Okay, but if he wins the primary, are you going to vote for him? Being in Wisconsin, I will vote for Sanders. I will talk about how he is the lesser of two evils, how he's a terrible candidate, and how I think he's going to lose the election. Gee, I wonder who said that last time around.
You mean all those Sanders supporters who showed up to vote for Hillary in numbers higher than Hillary supporters showed up to vote for Obama in 2008? Or do you mean Sanders himself, who campaigned harder for Hillary than anyone not named Clinton? No? Okay. And I'm not sure what your basis is for asserting that one of the most popular politicians in the country is not going to win in the general.
I know that no matter how many reasons I give, I will always be told I'm wrong by Sanders supporters and that my reasons are dumb and yada yada yada. I could do more, but I think in the interest of time, we're going to wrap this video up. So again, the reasons for me never voting for Bernie Sanders in a Democratic primary are the following. He's not a Democrat. He's undermined the Democratic Party. He's run against the Democratic Party. He's renounced the Democratic Party multiple times. And it might not be important to you to have someone who represents the Democratic Party who actually supports it. That's fine. For me, it is. He's doing a disservice to both socialism and capitalism by trying to make them look like the same thing, or to not really be clear on the difference between democratic socialism, social democracy, and current Republican Party policy. And I'm just not having that. I can't support that. I will never get behind making people dumber when you're trying to get policies out there and to get a campaign going and to run as president, not actually knowing what socialism is and how it's different from capitalism, and actually proposing socialist policy, paying for student loans with taxes for millionaires, making college tuition free. None of that is about socialism. You can do all that with restructured capitalism. And that's all I see from Bernie.
And yet, socialists support him. And there's reasons for that. His rhetoric is couched in class politics and international solidarity. He's been trying to push politics left for his entire career. He didn't just start talking about Medicare for All in 2016. He's been doing it for over 30 years. He cared about the working class while the Democrats were by and large abandoning us. If you set aside his policies and focus on his politics, it becomes pretty clear that he is a socialist who's running on a platform of social democracy because that's the strategic thing to do. I mean, do you think he should be running on a platform of seizing the means of production and collectivized farming?
Oh, and can I add one last note? His followers are trash. Now, I'm sorry if you're a Sanders supporter and you're not a jerk. Congratulations, you're a rarity. But the fact is that Sanders supporters are the worst. They're the absolute worst. I know people will say, not supporting Sanders because his supporters are awful is stupid. Well, you know who tells me that? Bernie Sanders supporters. Because they insult people all the time, and they don't want to win them over.
And we're back to that drill tweet. It's not stupid to not support Sanders for his supporters being trash, as you say, and all they do is insult people. You so hypocritically pointed out. It's just not a reason at all. Because here's the secret. everyone's supporters are insufferable. I don't support Andrew Yang, not because his followers thrashed me after my UBI video. Not trying to paint with a broad brush here, some of you were perfectly lovely, but because I'm skeptical of his policies and his Silicon Valley bullshit. I don't not support Buttigieg because his followers are incessant dorks, but because he's basically just young Biden. Every stan on Twitter is an asshole, but I can see why you view Sanders supporters so negatively. You're a public figure who has historically received a healthy amount of harassment, and you've been an outspoken critic of Sanders for a while now. The worst among us target you out of spite, as they do Movie Bob. And that serves to skew your view of the movement. To make things worse, when people do actually try to engage with you in good faith, they can be indistinguishable from the trash. It can be hard to tell whether or not you're just being sea lioned, and it can be easier to just block them all and have done with it. It's not something I've personally experienced, but I've seen it happen a number of times. So there's one last little bit of Kristi's video, and I'm not going to cover all of it, so again, like I said, watch her video. But first, I want to go over her reasons for not supporting Sanders. Number one, Sanders is not a Democrat. He doesn't uphold Democratic values, and he undermines the party rather than strengthening it. No, he's not a Democrat, because he would rather be beholden to his constituents than a political apparatus, and I would argue that favoring party over people is a betrayal of actual democratic values. And the Democratic Party has done a perfectly fine job undermining itself over the last few decades. One need only look around to see evidence of this. Coincidentally, if you see Chuck Schumer, tell him to get the fuck back to work. Number two, Sanders isn't a socialist. He's a social democrat, and social democracy is something that Kristi wants, but not Bernie's social democracy. I know, I'm confused too. The only thing I can figure is that she thinks he won't be successful at it, which the movement behind him calls that assertion into question. Or she thinks that he's trying to move too fast, which is a little ridiculous given that, globally we are way behind on dealing with the issues of income inequality and climate change, and we're behind the rest of the global north in dealing with those issues. 3. His supporters are trash. Like I said, Kristi gets a lot of harassment, everybody's supporters are trash, and we who support Sanders are just kind of sick of fucking around. Her 4th reason isn't one she listed out. It has to be gleaned from what she said.
We're socialists and we're gonna, eliminate private health insurance. That won't get elected. I will talk about how he is the lesser of two evils, how he's a terrible candidate, and how I think he's gonna lose the election. It's Bernie Sanders and his supporters are out there lording it on Twitter. We are going to alienate independent voters and moderate and conservative Democrats right the way away.
The old electability argument. The hardest election for Sanders to win is going to be the primary, because its structures are arrayed against him. See 2016 for more. But in the general, I don't see a problem. He does better versus Trump than most of the other candidates, and he's one of the most popular politicians in the country, and he can speak to the issues of rural voters because he comes from a rural state. But most importantly, he activates voters who usually sit out elections. Most of these folks came out for Obama in 2008 and 2012 because he promised something different. Some of them came out in 2016 and voted for Trump because he promised something different. Both of those presidents failed to deliver on that promise. And I am not trying to claim that they are equivalent. They're both war criminals, but one is an actual fascist. There's a very big difference. But Bernie is a different kind of candidate. No matter how much effort the Republican Party puts into smearing him as some commie, or CNN tries to make it seem like he's not even running unless he's feuding with Warren, the American people are smarter than we give them credit. They can tell the difference. Kristi, you can do better than this. Not your lack of support for Sanders. You do you. But of your 4 reasons, I count 2 that are really just non-issues, 1 that is not supported by the data, and 1 that is a critique of his language that doubles as a critique of his politics, but they're sort of politics that you support. As an aside, I don't have time to go through all of Kristi's work, so, if one of her subscribers finds this video and is able to provide me with some clarity on what her views are of social democracy, and how they differ from Bernie's, I would very much appreciate that clarity, because as far as I can tell, Bernie is the only social democratic candidate running right now. And again, one last time, this video is not to drag Kristi. Leave her the fuck alone. And if I came off as aggressive or anything, I apologize. It comes from a place of real existential stress, because Bernie's politics are something I didn't know I needed until he started running. I didn't even realize that they were my politics. And Kristi is good people. I respect her. It's weird because I can do response videos to reactionary nerds, and I can be aggressive and do it with a bit of levity and jokiness, casually, because they're a bunch of reactionary nerds. But, when you're doing it a response to someone who, basically you share the same values, you just feel like they're fucking this one thing up. You have to really thread a needle, because it can feel like they are somehow tainting your values, and that's not the case. So you have to be careful with how you crack your jokes and how aggressive you get in it what ways. I think that I wanted to end on that point, because I think it's something for my fellow leftists, my fellow Bernie supporters to remember, that these people are gettable. We have to be trying to reach them as opposed to fight with them. Fight with the right. Do that. But try to reach, your fellow people who are on the left, even if they're on the center left. And Bernie can be a bridge to that, because most people are in favor of what he's putting forward. All right, I'm going to work on a D&D campaign, because the last campaign my friend tried to start sort of just fell apart, and I want to play D&D. I'm going to start one with my sister and her fiance and my fiance. We're just going to fucking do it. Ugh, I just want to play some D&D. Cheers.